North Korea is undoubtedly the most closed country to the outside world, and its inhabitants are for sure the most isolated people on the planet. The North Koreans have neither internet nor smartphones, which are totally prohibited in the country, and are therefore only informed through the national propaganda channels. Living for the most part in precarious conditions and without any hope, the fellow citizens of the despotic Kim Jong Un only aspire to a little entertainment and joy, things that they are stubbornly denied. In this video, you will see the extent of censorship and propaganda in North Korea, and how outrageously cruel some of the state's measures can be. If there is one place on Earth where you won't be able to enjoy the videos of World Revealed, it's in North Korea. In fact, you won't even have access to YouTube, or even to the internet in Kim Jong Un's country. North Korea is indeed the most closed and isolated country in the world, and the state censorship is completely omnipresent. The country is so isolated and padlocked that it can easily be compared to the largest open-air prison in the world, or even worse, to the largest hard-labor prison in the history of human civilization. For the poor people of North Korea literally live under a regime of forced and underpaid labor, and almost all North Koreans have no choice in the jobs they hold. The government determines in a totally arbitrary and unilateral way which job will be occupied by which citizen. These poor and starving employees are forced to work themselves to death without being able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Indeed, no matter how much work they do, or how many hours they spend doing it, they will always get a meager salary at the end of the month, barely enough to keep them from starving. And besides their regular jobs, North Korean workers are requisitioned several times a year by the government. Vast national campaigns are indeed launched every year, in order to supposedly stimulate the country's economy by building new roads and civil and military infrastructures. This is a nonsense because, in North Korea, it is literally forbidden for the common people to own or drive any kind of motorized vehicles. It is strictly forbidden for the North Koreans to use any vehicle other than a bicycle, and the few cars that circulate in the country belong to the elite and to the high-ranking members of the single party. The only beneficiaries of these road infrastructures, built by the blood and sweat of millions of North Koreans, are therefore only a handful of dignitaries and close to the regime. But the main beneficiary of his country is, without doubt, his supreme leader, the thick-skinned Kim Jong Un. For in truth, everything in North Korea belongs to him, including the land, water, and air, as well as the country's own inhabitants, which he can dispose of as he pleases and over which he literally has the power of life and death. This modern-day pharaoh has a quasi-divine status in North Korea, thanks to the incredible state propaganda machine, which for more than 50 years has been engaged in the greatest brainwashing in the history of mankind. The one-party regime wishes to keep total control over the North Korean people, in order to shape their thinking and indoctrinate them further with the cult of personality of its supreme leader. Thus, thousands of giant posters and colossal statues of Kim Jong Un, but also of his father and grandfather, are displayed everywhere in the big North Korean cities. The Communist Party, worthy heir of the Stalinist regime, wastes millions of dollars every year on ornaments and flowerbeds to decorate the symbols of the Kim dynasty. But the state propaganda does not stop there, on the contrary. It is present in all aspects of the daily life of North Koreans. If you turn on a television or radio in Pyongyang or Wonsan, you are pretty sure to hear a propaganda program, which vehemently and authoritatively praises the one-party regime and its supreme leader. The national television and radio stations are all equipped with the same indoctrination programming that North Koreans have to endure all day long. Even singers and artists produce propaganda content for the regime, and countless songs and poems in honor of the Kim dynasty flood the airwaves and are played relentlessly on all stations. The poor North Koreans would have liked to watch American movies or attend rock and pop concerts, but this is absolutely not possible. Even worse, if you get caught in North Korea watching such programs, you are liable to jail or even death by execution. It is strictly forbidden to watch movies or programs from capitalist countries, not even a good Western or romantic comedy, and anyone who violates this rule will be in serious trouble. Even the TV and radio sets sold in the country have been internally manipulated to prevent the reception of foreign channels. And each household can only have one set, which it must first report and have inspected by the agents of the single party. The main fear of the latter is South Korea, whose television channels can be received near the border areas. And despite the repression and the strict and punctilious controls of the agents of the regime, many North Koreans manage to capture these channels and to watch them privately, bypassing the measures of censorship of the state. Because the North Korean people are very fond of the audiovisual programs of their southern neighbors, especially of their TV serials and K-pop concerts. Thanks to this kind of programs, the poor inhabitants of this huge open-air prison can at least be entertained and dream. It is indeed a gaping chasm that separates the two countries, although geographically speaking, there is only the distance of a stone's throw between the two. South Korea, proud of its capitalist way of life and its financial and industrial success, seduces the North Koreans by the opulence, the freedom, and the comfort that its inhabitants enjoy. In order to forget the hunger which is always tormenting them and the exhausting fatigue which they undergo every day, the North Koreans love to watch K-drama, soaps operas very popular in all Asia. These television series are Kim Jong Un's greatest fear since they represent a capitalist and open world, the antithesis of his tyrannical regime. And his greatest fear is that his fellow citizens will be inspired by so much freedom and that they will end up demanding it in turn. So to fight against this bad influence of South Korea and its traditional allies, the United States and Japan, the single-party regime does not hesitate to severely punish anyone caught watching South Korean channels. Even the youngest children are not spared from this cruel treatment, as shown by the sordid trial of 6 young schoolchildren, accused of having watched South Korean movies and TV series during the past year, and of having shared them with their classmates. The unfortunate children, who had to undergo beforehand a police interrogation more than muscular, were brought literally chained to the court. Tanned and humiliated by the magistrates and members of the single party, these poor boys were finally sentenced to 5 years of hard labor in a concentration camp. This was not the most terrible sentence, because the judge's verdict could have been life imprisonment or even a firing squad. Thus, according to the criteria of severity of the North Korean justice, these children are more than lucky to have had their lives saved. Unfortunately, this is not the case for everyone, like this poor engineer from the city of Wonsan, who was executed for sharing South Korean music, the famous K-pop. This poor family man was caught selling CDs and small USB sticks loaded with South Korean movies, music, and shows organized by type and genre. The unfortunate man, who was selling these storage devices at $12 each, was taking advantage of this small clandestine business to make some money and be able to feed his family. Unfortunately for him, his transactions did not go unnoticed and he was quickly denounced to the authorities, who shot him without scruples, in front of his family and neighbors. With such a sentence, one can imagine that the regime wants to set an example to the rest of the population and show them that it is absolutely not allowed to watch programs from enemy countries. The state has also tightened its vigilance in the neighborhoods, regularly inspecting homes for television sets that might be able to receive foreign channels. But the degree of censorship goes even further because, in Kim Jong Un's country, it is not even allowed to wear certain hairstyles or to adopt certain clothing styles. For example, it is strictly forbidden for anyone to wear jeans, which are considered one of the blatant symbols of American capitalism. The unfortunate man or woman who would dare to wear jeans would indeed be exposed to heavy sentences. Even more serious measures will be the lot of those who would wear skinny or torn jeans, or who would dye their hair in the South Korean fashion. Piercings and tattoos are also extremely prohibited, as well as any external sign that could be assimilated to any Western culture, including makeup and lipsticks that are too flashy. But beyond the aspect of dress or haircut, it is also forbidden for North Koreans to express themselves in the same way as their southern cousins. It is indeed forbidden by law to speak or write in South Korean styles, or to use urban slang like the one used in soap operas and music videos of the rich neighbor. For example, it is totally forbidden to use terms like oppa, older brother, and dongsang, younger brother, to refer to friends or acquaintances on the street. People can end up in concentration camps for simply saying hello to someone in the South Korean way. With such a level of censorship and propaganda, the 25 million North Koreans are literally prisoners on parole, held under the yoke of their terrible and cruel big-bellied jailer. The latter will not stop fighting any foreign influence that could challenge his power, while brandishing the atomic threat internationally, to avoid any interference from NGOs and the UN. Suffering from famine and restrictions, further aggravated by the world COVID-19 crisis, the North Korean people suffer in silence. Very little information is indeed filtering out of the country, and no one can establish with precision the extent of the damage and deprivation suffered by the country and its poor inhabitants. Only a few rare survivors of this Stalinist tyranny, who managed to sneak across the borders, can testify today about the misfortunes of their people. But these testimonies are almost always anonymous because if they were to come out in the open, these poor people would risk putting their families and loved ones in serious danger. Heavy reprisals by the regime are indeed being carried out on the relatives and even distant acquaintances of all those who have emigrated illegally and dared to testify about what is happening in the country. Even diplomats and party members who travel or work abroad cannot take their entire family with them on their trips. They are literally held hostage by Kim Jong Un, who will not hesitate to liquidate them at the slightest slip of their close relatives. This system of terror is in fact inspired by the Sicilian Mafia, more precisely by the Cosa Nostra, this tentacular and secular organization which accepts new members only under the condition that they have a family in the country. This will allow the mafia to retaliate against the poor innocent family in case of treason or insubordination to the orders given by the Godfather. So Kim Jong Un is indeed the godfather of North Korea, and his system of governance has nothing to envy to the New York mob or the Chicago outfit of the 1930s. What did you think of this video? Tell us what you think in the comments. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video if you learned something. See you tomorrow, same time, same channel.